All right, so I guess yesterday got a little heated. I probably shouldn't have left a comment on Easy Jeezy's channel over there. I probably should have just called him on the phone. But I don't ever remember endorsing any of that stuff. And I've only used A&A cylinders one time over the last 3-year period that I can remember. And that was for Gaydon. He brought all his own parts here when I first met him. And the parts were so good that I knew that I really didn't want to build the motor. And he told me that, you know, every time somebody built my motor, it blew up. And I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. I can build your motor that won't blow up. So I offered to put a motor together for him. And he brought his parts over here. And they happened to be those cylinders. And they were slip-ins. And it smokes pretty damn good if you watch the videos of him racing that car. It's fast, but it smokes. And that's the only motor I've ever built that smokes. Now, they haven't broke yet, and they are the forged ones, not the hyper-eutectic. However, I think the big issue with the parts that you're using, that company came on scene probably about, I don't know, 5 years ago. They started with a few things, and you know, they started copying more things, and before you know it, they have everything. And here's the SCAT catalog. Here's their economy engine kit. You know, they don't recommend turning this stuff over 5,000 RPM if you read their footnotes. And 130 horsepower is max for cast crank, cheap rod combination. If you call them and you're going to make more power than that, they'll suggest the H-beam rods. And they'll give you some better parts that aren't going to fail when you increase the horsepower. Here's the rod in question. This is a 2009 catalog. And you can read that yourself. 3/8 bolts are stronger than 5/16 bolts. That's the manufacturer telling you that. And there's the rod. Well, Scott's the one that made the rod, and then A&A took it and copied it over in China. And I'm sure they didn't ask for the same materials or quality. You know, they have to make it cheaper, or they would have just repackaged it. And I'll give you an example of that. I told you before I like CB Performance because they're stand-up guys. And Pat Downs is active in the Volkswagen community. He tries to put videos out there to teach people how to do stuff, and he makes an effort at least. This is a CB Performance spring here. K-Motion is one of the best springs you can buy. Now, they didn't go the bullshit route and go, hey man, this is our spring. They bought it from K-Motion and repackaged it to let you know it's not some shitty part. It's a quality part. It's made for racing, and it's going to work. It's going to wipe your cam out every time. But anyway, the problem with this rod is the cylinder heads that you picked, okay? The first set of heads probably would have been way more suited for your application with that horsepower that rod's capable of handling. When you go to a wild port like this, and you're going to make power. The heads are what make the power, and that's what's going to blow the motor up is the horsepower. You can make 100 horsepower, 90 horsepower, and probably be very dependable with that combination of parts. And that's probably a good reason why, you know, people have told you, hey man, I've used it and never had a problem. Either in a stock application or a low horsepower application, you would probably be more than fine with that stuff. But it has a limit. And the bottom line is, you know, I make these videos for you guys so you don't have issues. You know, I try to teach you how to do this stuff. I've already used the cheaper stuff, and I know that it fails. So it's not that I'm making a video out of spite, because if I was going to do something out of spite, I would just keep my mouth shut and let you put all that stuff together and have it blow up on you and go, I told you so. But that's not the way I try to do it. You know, I try to show you what I use, explain why I use it, and sometimes it seems like people just go out and buy the total opposite. And I know the luck you're going to have. If the Volkswagen rod failed, you know, more than likely that rod's going to be not as strong as the Volkswagen rod. And some of you older guys that have been around, you know, when we first started racing Volkswagens, and we were setting records back in the 70s, we were using either a Porsche rod or a Volkswagen rod. And somebody's told people that the rod length determines the RPM band of the motor, and that has nothing to do with the RPM band. It's cam and cylinder head. The RPM band of the motor, the rod, it doesn't matter. You can go into the Master Series, and my favorites there, the Dart Master Series, and they did a pretty intense study on rod ratio, and they did it for GM. They use a 6.2300 rod and a 5.500, and there was no horsepower difference. The only thing that rod selection is really good for as far as length is the amount that the cylinder gets pulled out of the bottom of the cylinder. And when you add stroke to a crankshaft, obviously the piston wants to come out of the top of the cylinder. And the way that we fix that is we order a stroker piston, and the pin location is moved up to the oil ring. You can see how the pin's been moved up. Here's a stock stroke piston here for relationship. You can see the difference. You can't make that up with a rod, because what happens is when you put a short rod on, instead of the piston coming here at the bottom, it's trying to pull it here now because the rod's so short. It's pulling it almost out of the cylinder, and you can see the further you pull this rod out of the cylinder, the more unstable it gets. See how it rocks more, less. This is what makes horsepower. If you pull it out too far, your ring pack gets beat up, you lose your cylinder seal, and the horsepower is gone. So anytime you select rod length, you want to be sure that you're selecting rod length to keep the cylinder as stable as possible, the piston as stable as possible on the turnaround. The less we pull it out of the bottom of the cylinder, the better the motor is going to seal up and the more power it's going to make. We put a short rod in there, we end up pulling the piston too far out of the bottom of the cylinder. And also you can have interference with the piston and the counterweight when you use a short rod. Sometimes you have to machine the piston right here on an 82 crank for sure. I don't know about a 78, probably not. And if you use the stock location wrist pins, that will be far further away. But anyway, I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. Another subscriber said that these heads are not manufactured in the U.S. They're cast in Brazil and machined in the U.S. And again, at least they're making the effort. You know, when I was a kid, you couldn't buy a head like this. You'd have to go to Fumio or Gene Berg. A set of Berg heads were about $2,700. And you'd get a U set of Type 3 castings that had been beat to shit, all welded up with porosity all in them. And they'd haul ass. I think every record scooter has ever got, it's either been with a set of Berg heads or Fumios. And basically, they took one of those heads and CNC'd it and made it available to everybody. But the bigger you make the head, the more power your motor is going to make. And you know, you might want to consider stepping down the cylinder head if you're going to use the lower cost rods. So let's try to tailor a combination of parts that will live together, okay? And that's all we can do at this point. You've already bought the pieces, so now you have to try to tailor it to where the pieces will work together. Obviously, the crank's probably better quality than the cast crank that some companies sell. A forged crank is a forged crank. Sometimes the metal's not as good as the old days. The one subscriber mentioned that he bought a set of cam gears 20 years ago and they were in a motor. He was describing an engine that he had. And I'll describe the motor for you. And it's a shit brick house, dude. He's got a stock German Volkswagen crank with counterweights welded on it. German steel, the best stuff ever made. And that's probably one of the best cranks you can get. I personally feel like a Volkswagen crank with counterweights welded on it is better than, definitely better than an MP, you know, or a cheaper low cross crank with counterweights as one piece forged. These cranks flex quite a bit. They're not as strong as the typical. It's not like you have a Berg forged crank or a scat crank in there. This is going to have deflection. It's going to move around. it's going to wear the bearings, and it's not going to be, you know, something that you put in there for a lot of miles. A lot of people have made comments that they have a 78 and they've had to do more clearance than they had to when they bought an 82 in the old days, and they beef all this stuff up now because the quality of the part is not as good as it used to be. You know, 4130 chrome moly is a composite of different types of alloys, but when you take the steel over to China, they basically melt cars down, and you have seats in there, dashboards, all kinds of contaminants and stuff. So the steel's not as clean as if you went to Sweden and had a Berg crank made. And that's why I never talk about grain flow or structure on any of these crappy cranks, because it's not worth the conversation. It's not like when Gene went over to Sweden where the Porsche cranks were made and wanted the grain flow in the radius of the stroke. And that's why Gene never liked to go bigger than an 82 stroke. He felt like you got into that grain structure of the crank and it weakened it. And that's what gives you the flex. So it's just, it's the way I was raised, Jeezy. I can't do anything about it. I just, I lived at a house for 20 years where that shit wasn't allowed in the building, and it was always for good reason. We have competitors in this town that use that stuff, and they have bad luck all the time. And normally the problem with something like that is you make an investment, you buy those parts, you put it together, and if you don't have catastrophic failure, you have shorter life than you expect out of those parts. And a lot of times that's a deterrent to people in the Volkswagen world. You know, they buy the parts, they're told they're good, and they don't know the difference between a scat crank and a crank you can buy for $350 or $250. So I know that Scat, I was on their website the other day ordering some cases and engine kits, and Scat, they offer 3 different crankshafts now. They have a forged crank that's not their race crank, but the race crank is $1,100, and the crank that we use in the Pro Mod car, which is the flange crank here, this is the one we use, the billet. You know, it's got the flange rear seal there, not the flange seal, but anyway, the flywheel bolts to the back of it. And this is like a Chevy style pattern, so you can buy all kinds of cool clutches and stuff once you get this. And I think they even have, yeah, they have a J&G floater or, you know, clutch assembly. They'll machine the flywheel if you want. But we use this crank. It's $1,300 plus $200 for the flywheel, and then any machine work you have done to the flywheel, you have to machine the back of the case for the flange. And I don't use those a lot on street motors because you know, there's not a lot of people left that want that kind of stuff. Now, the old days we used to build quite a few of those. This is the crank that I use in my car. I bought mine in 1982, and that's the only testimony I can give you to the quality of the part. You know, and they're just as nice. I see them come in down at Scooters. He uses them quite a bit, and they're pretty sweet. For the dollar, you pay a little. You can buy, you know, you can buy 3 of these for what one of these costs. But that's how I would go if I was going to build a nice motor and it was going in a really sweet car. You want to probably just make the investment and buy the better crank. And hopefully everybody's feelings won't be hurt for too long, and we'll all get over it. But I never want to go the opposite way and try to find out how cheap I can go on the parts. I see no advantage to using that kind of stuff, because you just you take the chance of you know, having a failure, and failure is not what we want. We want it to be rock solid and last, and be able to beat on it. I have to build my stuff so my kid can drive it and it won't blow up. And you know, I don't want to build a motor for a customer and have them have it fail. Most of the motors that I built are still in service. I did build a motor for that bus I referred to. I'm not real happy about it, and I haven't got it back yet. I haven't heard from him. I just heard through the grapevine it blew up, and I said, why didn't you bring it back? It's warranted for 3 years, and he's pissed off. That's why I didn't bring it back. So That's what happens when you use that kind of stuff. I use that kind of stuff. I can't do it because I'm building stuff for other people. And if you're building stuff for yourself, I guess you can take a chance if you go into it knowing that you might have a failure. So all I'm saying is maybe step the heads down a little bit, go mellow on the cam, keep the compression low, and you might have good luck with that stuff. But I didn't mean to hurt any feelings. I feel like I sort of lay it out for you guys, and then when you go buy the cheap stuff, it sort of, you know, it hurts my feelings. I'm not going to lie to you. People say you can't be on YouTube with thin skin, but the truth of it is you guys are my friends, and I'm not looking to bullshit you. I can't lie to you. And when I try to tell you how to do something the proper way and you do it the other way, it's sort of, you know, it hurts. It's not like you guys are just some asshole watching my video. I take it sort of personal, and I want you to have the best possible luck. So that's why I'm a dick like I'm a dick, and I was raised like that, so it's in my blood, man. It's what I'm passionate about. I love Volkswagens, and if I could, I would be racing it every week, but I'm not able to do that right now. So I go with Noel and try to pit her around here and stay into it, but it's still a sport that I feel really strongly about. And I've watched it deteriorate over the years and become what it's become. And it's sort of disappointing. So I'm just telling you this stuff so you guys have better luck. Hopefully you guys can take something from the videos and save the money and buy the better quality parts and have good luck when you put stuff together.